Chris Sewall here, baseball card collector, investor, dealer, in that order. Welcome, everyone. Question and answer time. Thank you, everyone, for submitting your questions. A lot of great ones. I had to split it up into two videos here, but we're going to jump right into part one here. First question was sent in by Scott, who wrote, I totally understand that the four major grading companies are not a perfect apples to apples, but as they've made efforts to get their scales more consistent, don't you think there would be a lot of value in understanding a more holistic pop count for any given card in a particular condition? If a particular PSA 9 card is a pop 200, but BGS plus SGC plus CGC each have 50 of the same card in a 9, then wouldn't a more holistic pop count be 350? Currently, pop counts are treated like subtotals, and I think understanding the wider total would refine just how rare a given card in a given condition is. After all, isn't that the whole idea? Yeah, totally. That would be a much better way to look at it. I mean, I think the four companies are not willing to share their information with each other, so there isn't like a universal pop report, which I've heard people talk about. But yeah, that would definitely be the correct way to think about it, is how many 9s exist from a major grading company as opposed to like just a PSA pop 9. If you're referring to like my videos when I often will just say there's a PSA pop 14 or whatever, that's simply because I don't have the time to research all four pop reports. William McDonald 7654 wrote, what would you rate as the 5 best grading card companies and why? That would be helpful. I'm looking to send in a few cards. Well, best is very subjective, and it really depends on what your goals are for your cards. And I would need to know that before I sort of advised which company to use. But most people consider there to be 4 major grading companies. If you go by market share, yeah, that's about right. PSA is by far the biggest in terms of market share. They've been around the longest. They have the highest resale value. But there's some negatives associated with PSA. Beckett has subgrades. They're the only of the major 4 companies to offer subgrades, if that's something very important to you. SGC has really fast turnaround times. They're pretty cheap in terms of cost. Some people really like their black tuxedo look, and then CGC is kind of the newest of the big 4, but they have really nice looking labels and again good specs in terms of cost and turnaround time. So it sort of depends on what you're looking for, and that's something you would have to research on your own. There's other companies farther down the list in terms of market share, HGA and GMA, and Tag is a company on the rise, but they're much farther down, like way less than 1% of the market share. So a lot of companies to research, but those would sort of be some of the bigger ones. User IY3WZ7CE5S wrote, with so many available, what are your most used apps or websites for card pricing and research? I know most think eBay is still king, but curious where you get your prices from when looking into comps. So I still use eBay completed sales. I mean, it's great data. It's free data. Very, very useful. It only goes back 3 months or so there's limitations there. But I use vintagecardprices.com. That's kind of my go-to. That shows all completed sales of graded cards going back to like 2009 or something like that. It shows on eBay and all the major auction houses, so really, really useful data. And it shows you like the highs, the lows, and the mid, and that sort of thing. I've used Market Movers and Card Hedge before. I like both of those. Don't currently use them, but both of those I thought were quite good. And I've used Terapeak as well. Steve, my good man, 7809 wrote, looking at it from the baseball investor side, are you concerned at all about the Beckett cards falling behind SGC or even CGC in value, not including super high-end modern or ultra-modern cards? So, concerned, I don't personally have a lot of investment cards in Beckett holders, and I would say that, the values have already dropped. Like, Beckett values in modern cards, other than sort of the super high-end stuff, has already fallen quite a bit in relation to the other grading companies. So, concerned that that's going to happen, I would say that already has happened. Will it continue? I mean, maybe not, but I would say it's more that it's already happened than I'm concerned it's going to happen more in the future. William Potts 7205 wrote, when 9s and 10s can pretty much be interchangeable a lot of the time, why is there so much of a discrepancy in the value or price, especially when the pop count is fairly close or low? So many times the 9s look as good, if not better. Cover up the grade and you can't tell which is which. It's a great observation, and I would say that 9s, the difference in value between 9s and 10s has actually gotten wider over time, and I think that's because there's so many cards out there, and so people want to zoom in on the best of the best, and they perceive PSA 10s or BGS 10s as the best of the best, and so there's such a premium put on that. From a collector's standpoint, it's really a great opportunity to, like you said, buy 9s that look just as nice as 10s at a fraction of the price. So if you're sort of viewing it from a collector standpoint, it's actually a nice opportunity there. Collector's World Fargo asked, at the beginning of some of your videos, there's an infant with a Topps 52 mantle. Is that a creative image? If not, how old is the infant now? And was the mantle an original 1952, and did you ever get it graded? Yeah, that's an original 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, and that's my the pictures of my son, who's now 8 years old. So that photo was 7 or 8 years ago, and that's the first 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle I ever owned. I bought it as part of a collection. It was raw, and I sold it raw actually just like a couple weeks later, and the buyer actually ultimately sent it off to PSA, and it graded a 2.5. Farron wrote, I'm impressed with the premiums that longtime eBay sports card sellers can get. With over 100,000 items sold, the Sewall brand clearly has value. Would you consider selling on virtual consignment? I know you love to handle cards, but high-res photos can be pretty nice too. Yeah, I've considered what my next step in the hobby might be. Maybe a consignment company or an auction house, or I don't know. I don't know what it would be. But at the moment, I'm pretty happy with the way things are going. I mean, I think the problem for me with consignment, a consignment company, is that my least favorite aspect of cards is the selling, and consignment company is basically all selling. I like buying, I like sorting, and I don't particularly like receiving cards and just selling it. I like to buy the cards, play with the cards, and then I have to sell it also, of course. But if I started like a consignment company, that would sort of be focusing on the one aspect of the hobby I don't truly love. Ian Smith wrote, I love the idea of collecting vintage, but I don't really know much about sets prior to the early 90s. What are some good ways to learn more about vintage collecting? I don't live near an LCS, and I don't have a good community of local collectors nearby. Ah, that's very, very cool to hear. If you're looking for purely informational stuff, cardboardconnection.com is a fantastic resource. I'm not affiliated with them, but I use them all the time. Basically, any information you want on any set is there. Great search options and all that. But if you're looking for more of a community thing, I would say look at Facebook. I don't use Facebook card groups much, so I don't really have one that I can recommend. But there are a lot of great ones. A lot of people I know love them, and there's great communities, and they're all very, very focused on anything you want: 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. Particular player, particular team, whatever. So I would look at some Facebook card groups. Like I said, I don't have one to recommend specifically. If anyone is part of a great vintage or let's say 1990 and back Facebook group and they want to leave it in the comments, please do. Andrew Marks asked, when will PSA offer a cheaper crossover service, and should BGS spend their money building a time machine? Yeah, that's BGS definitely should invest in a time machine, whatever it costs, go back a few years and make some changes there. But PSA, in terms of lowering prices, I don't see them lowering prices. I mean, they might have some specials here and there, but I don't see them lowering prices anywhere. There's really no need for them to. They're getting all the submissions as is. It's not like they need more. I mean, they're getting something like 80% of all submissions in the entire hobby at the moment. So until that sort of changes, I don't think there's any incentive for them to lower prices. User My1M Sizzle wrote, I have a card show etiquette question. I generally go to shows to buy, but always see others there with cards to sell to dealers. How do you feel about other collectors asking those sellers to look at their cards? Does that offend the dealers who paid to set up at shows, or is that no big deal? I typically shy away from that, but interested to get feedback on if this is taboo or no problem. That's a great question, and you might get different answers from different people. I would sort of say it's very important to be aware and respectful of the fact that dealers have paid a lot of money to be set up at these shows and have sort of first right to conduct business there. And if you intercept somebody in the aisle and say, hey, I've never met you, but I see you're selling cards, let's go over there and do a deal. You're sort of taking away business from a dealer who's paid money to be there and have that right, if you will. Certainly you never want to interfere with a deal. If somebody's selling cards to a dealer and you walk up and say, hey, I'd be interested in those, that kind of thing is an absolute no question about it, unless you have the dealer's permission or something like that. But yeah, definitely don't do that. But even if you're not in the middle of a deal and you just sort of find somebody you don't know, hey, I saw you selling cards, let's go off here and do a deal. I personally kind of think that that's bad etiquette. Now, obviously, if you have it predetermined, hey, let's meet at the show and do a deal, obviously that's okay. Or if you run into somebody in the aisle, oh, hey, let's do a deal. Well, certainly that sort of thing is okay. But I mean, buying from somebody you don't know who's just walking around, I think, to me personally, I think you need sort of a dealer's permission to be able to do that at a card show. I mean, there's events for this sort of thing, trade nights and things like that, where it's more set up for, one-on-one individual deals to be done that way. Chris C4264 wrote, what is it going to take to get rid of bad apples in the hobby? From all the bad breakers and scammers, it seems to me something needs to be done. I'm not talking regulations, but education and teaching the new collectors and younger generation about the pitfalls of the hobby. Breaking is gambling, but then again, so is spending $500 on a box of cards and then ripping and expecting your money back. Also, the hobby having one mega monopoly in charge of everything makes me feel we need to just buy older cards exclusively. So, I don't think you're ever going to get rid of bad apples. Any industry has, a few bad apples, no matter what it is. And sports cards certainly going all the way back to, people often think like the 80s and 90s were these innocent times when, everything was hunky-dory. But, I remember dealers ripping people off left and right because nobody knew values of anything, so they totally could. There was a ton of trimming going on back then, fake autographs all over the place because there was no, grading companies and this sort of thing. So, I think bad apples have always been part of the hobby, and it will always be a part of any industry. And I think it's important to educate people as much as you can. I think a lot of content creators and YouTubers and forums have done a great job, especially in recent years, of sort of bringing some of this stuff to light and, showing what the scams are and say, be aware of this and sort of making it harder for the bad apples to be bad, if you will. So I just think everyone should, continue to do that. Regarding your other points, if you're talking purely about value, yeah, breaking is gambling with terrible odds. Opening packs is gambling with terrible odds. No question about it. But I think a lot of people see it as more than just, the card's value. They see it as an experience. I mean, if you go to a movie, you spend $15, and after the movie's over, you have nothing to show for it. It's not like you own anything. You've just spent $15. But you spend $50 for the experience to watch the movie, and I think a lot of people view opening packs and breaking that way. They're spending money for the experience of opening packs or viewing the break, and they see value there. It's not something I promote or not something I'm interested in, but I think a lot of people are, and I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I would prefer that people don't go the gambling aspect and they go into the more buying singles and understanding the hobby that way. But who am I to tell people how to enjoy the hobby? Regarding your last point about the Fanatics takeover, yeah, there's a concern there, but we basically had monopolies for the last 10 years. Topps has had a monopoly on baseball, Panini on basketball and football. Fanatics is just taking it all over. I have no idea if they're going to be good or not, but to me it's probably just the same. It's going to be more of the same, just a different company running things with perhaps some new ideas that may or may not work out. Andrew wrote, would love to hear your thoughts on the new COMC iPhone app. I think they've done some things well, but could still improve here and there. So I actually have not tried it yet, which is funny because I basically use COMC almost every day, but I just haven't gotten around to getting the app and sort of shifting my attention to the app yet, but that's something I'll definitely be doing soon. ACD1994 wrote, there's been a resurgence in card shows and card stores in the past few years. However, with the oversaturation of graded slabs and ultramodern and products too, any concerns that, let's say 5 years from now, there will be a repeat of the junk wax era? The demand popularity for cards was flat in the late 90s or early 2000s and 2010s. Is it inevitable, in your opinion, history will repeat itself? So, I mean, something like that could happen. I don't know that I would necessarily predict that or predict any specific direction for the hobby at the moment. The parallels to the junk wax era, discussed before, and I think we've already seen a lot of it, right? I mean, a lot of the overproduced stuff has just plummeted in value recently, much like it did in the junk wax era. But there's also massive differences between the hobby today and the 1990s. I mean, the internet alone, eBay didn't exist back then. eBay, the grading companies weren't around, back then. Fanatics is the biggest company that's ever been a part of sports cards on any level before, and now they have a ton of power. What's that going to look like? We don't know. So will history repeat itself? I mean, maybe, but it's also, I think there's enough variables out there that make it a very, very different situation. In terms of, in 5 years, will things be flat or growing, or, I'm not really sure, but I am very sure that in 5 years, the hobby's going to be fine. Old the Giant asked 2 unrelated questions. Do you collect anything other than cards? And what is your least favorite part of the hobby? So I actually don't collect anything other than cards on any level. I'm a pure card guy. I have no interest in anything else. I don't know why that is. That's just how I'm wired. Whenever I buy a collection, there's other stuff in there. I basically just move everything else as quick as I can so I can play with the cards. But my favorite part of the hobby, I'm going to say 2, and they're sort of opposite things. One is card shows. I love being at card shows. You're just a ton of energy there, and everybody's a card nerd just like me. And everyone wants to just talk cards, and it's super fun. The other thing I love is just being alone by myself in my room here, put a game on in the background or a Star Wars movie, sort cards quietly for 2 hours, no interruptions, peace and quiet, sort of my meditation period. So those are my 2 favorite things, like super social and super antisocial aspects that I love. Least favorite part of the hobby, I mean, obviously bad apples, as we mentioned earlier, and sort of the selling aspect of card dealing. taking pictures of cards, posting listings on eBay, you know, shipping stuff out. This is the least fun part of the hobby for me. Matt F4727 wrote, what is the best way to organize a large collection of cards to make the deal go easier? For example, should complete sets be in numeric order, or should the rookies and stars be kept separate? What else can help make the deal go easier? So if you're talking about like you have a collection of cards and you're looking to sell it to somebody, and what will make that go the smoothest, by far the thing that will make it the easiest is to sort everything by value. Like put your most valuable cards here together in one spot, put your mid-level stuff all here in one spot, and put all your bulk, you know, cheaper stuff all together here. And that'll make it the easiest for someone, you know, like me or any dealer to come in and calculate what your collection's worth and come up with a fair price. Because the main thing, you know, we need to know is, okay, what's the most expensive stuff? So add that up quickly, and that's going to be a percentage that we can pay, and then you can do a separate calculations on the more bulkier stuff, and that just makes things easier. If you're regarding like a set, like let's say you had like a 1980 top set, and there's, you know, should you pull out the Ricky Henderson or leave it with the set? I would pull it out, but leave it with the set. So if you opened up the box, you would see the Henderson right there on the top, but keep it with the set. Like don't put it in a separate area, because then it gets confusing as, is that part of the set, or do you have a second Ricky Henderson? And, you know, and that can confuse things. So I would say pull it out and leave it with the set. Benjamin Smith 6063 asked, what are the winning Powerball numbers going to be? Nice try, Benjamin. I don't give out that information for free. You got to pay for that. Gary asked, what's the deal with the 1974 Topps baseball checklist? My buddy is trying to complete a raw set and thought he was almost done until he found out there were some parallels. On the back bottom of some checklists, there is either 1 dot or 2. What's up with this? So that's going to be basically the case with any vintage set. There's going to be some variations here and there, basically just, you know, slight differences in the printing on cards. And so there's 2 different versions of the card. And it can be very minor stuff. I don't know the example you're talking about, but it can be very minor stuff, 2 dots instead of 1, or sometimes it's an error that's been corrected. Sometimes it's, you know, different shades of color in the background, things like this. And so you'll hear people talk about a complete set, and they'll also hear about a complete master set. So a complete set of a 74 Topps will be 660 cards. A complete master set will be a little bit more than that. It'll be all 660 cards plus all the variations. And the master sets are a lot tougher to put together, because some of the variations here and there can be really, really hard to find. But it's just sort of another way to decide if you want to collect. Do you want the complete set, or you want the master set, or are you fine with the complete set? But that's it for part 1 of question and answers this round. Part 2 will be the rest of the questions But that's it for questions and answers this round, part 1. Part 2 will be the rest of the questions you submitted, and will be a week, I'll post it a week from today. Thanks, everyone.